Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Flex podcast presented by Prize Picks. I'm your host, Samantha Previte. On today's episode of 21 Questions, I am so happy to be joined by the one and only Scott Fish, who you can find on Twitter at ScottFish24. Welcome to the Fantasy Flex, Scott. How was your week 7?
Oh, it went about as well as you can imagine, given all the buys and everything. I made some mistakes. I had JJ Taylor in a few lineups and took him out right before game time. Those 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Didn't see him coming.
I took Khalil Herbert out of lineups. So that's where I am right now in life.
It was a tough matchup.
Tough matchup. Damian Williams is coming back from the COVID list.
Right.
I thought, at the very least, it was going to be a timeshare in a game that I thought that they wouldn't run a lot in. So yeah, I mean, that's definitely a bummer to have that on my bench. And I made just a completely rookie mistake because on Sundays I work and I was also like kind of packing at the same time. Okay. Totally forgot to take Darren Waller out of my lineup. I know that's my fault, whatever. It's just frustrating, like stuff like that happens, like injuries that are up in the air in the mornings when you're setting your lineups and maybe you just like kind of forget to go back and do it. I was just watching Red Zone and like having a great time. And then I was like, crap.
Yep. It happens to everyone. Every analyst in the industry has had something like that happen. Every person that's played fantasy has had that happen. Yeah. It's a thing.
I mean, I know it was a tough week for everyone because of the buys, but of course, like that affects everyone, though not equally. Some of my teams, I have literally no one, and I'm just like, I got to get more bodies in the lineup.
Exactly.
Some of the teams, I'm like, I'm missing like one guy. So it just, kind of just depends on the week and who you ended up drafting. So
absolutely. Like that was me too. JJ Taylor, no one's starting him anywhere, but I had rosters so hit that I was looking at guys like him. Other rosters, fine. Yep, absolutely.
I was just looking at my matchup in the Scott Fish Bowl, and it's not looking great. I think I need 30 points from Tyler Lockett tonight. So fingers crossed, right?
Yes, I hope you get it. And I hope DK Metcalf gets nothing based on my matchups.
You're saying there's a chance. I know. Yes. A lot of these Monday Night Miracles, I'm like, I need negative 50 points from like Derrick Henry or something.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, it's been an interesting year for sure. A lot of injuries, a lot of just like unexpected things, a lot of guys just like not showing up. So anyway, we'll just hop right in. Question 1.
Sounds good.
What year did you start playing fantasy and did you win your first league?
I did in 1992, and it was a dynasty league. Ooh. It's a long time. I was only like 12 or 13 at the time. It's not like I'm, 70 or anything. But yeah, no, I started playing in 92. My dad played this fantasy basketball Big Ten league where you would draft incoming freshmen and you'd keep them throughout until they left college. So that's how I knew how to play fantasy when we started playing fantasy football. So I did win that year. I won a lot of the years in the 90s because I was hyper obsessed and the people playing with me they liked it okay, but I was, that's kind of how it goes with us. And, it's such a passion for us that we're the most active person.
Are you still playing in that dynasty league? Like, is that
That's
amazing.
This is year 30. Yep. It's a keeper now. We moved it to a keeper from a dynasty.
Okay.
But it is year 30. We are in our 30th year right now.
That is incredible. I have a very weird path into football, which, to be clear, like what's the normal path into becoming an analyst? But still, like I did not grow up a sports fan. I did not, sort of, but certainly not football. My household has no affiliations with any teams. So I got into it strictly through fantasy and no like rooting for teams. And it certainly was very recent in comparison to everyone else. So I really miss out on some of these like cool stories when you're like, oh, I was 12 and I got into fantasy football and I was like, oh, I was like 24. But
we all have our own paths for so many things in life.
Well, that is a really cool story and just so cool that you're still playing in that league. What are the best and worst parts about playing fantasy football for you?
Wow. The best parts, just the camaraderie, the closeness with my friends, the like live drafts. When we have our live drafts, it's the best. We spend the whole day just hanging out, seeing each other that, friends for years. It's the community for me. The fantasy football, like the best parts of the community, the interacting, the getting to know tons of different people who have the same interests as you. It's when I go to these conferences and different analyst events or whatever, just meeting people that we immediately have this friendship thing we can talk about because we all have the same passion. Things I don't like, honestly, I don't know what I don't like. Maybe just that it's a grind, that you're never off. It's a 24/7. There's always something going on in the NFL world, it seems like.
I totally understand that. First, with the live drafts thing, very jealous. I've never done like a traditional live draft just because, like what I said. And even like in the leagues that I've been in, we were drafting in the same room, but we were on laptops and not everyone was there. So that was kind of like the only like live draft situation. The cool story that came out of that was someone threw up at the draft, which I thought was funny. Anyway, I definitely missed out on that. I would say like for me, the worst part is just sometimes like the trolls and social media and stuff, just being on like the side of giving advice. And certainly like you're held to such a high standard. Someone came at me and said like, oh, I'm not taking anything that you say seriously because of your trash Alex Collins take a couple weeks ago, when like everyone was putting Alex Collins in their lineups for the Thursday night game against the Rams. And I didn't even say, hey, go out there and start him. I said, I'm in the unfortunate situation where I have to start him and Samaje Perine. Right. And it's just like funny because you obviously can't appease everyone. And it's just, it's a grind. And I know, the feeling of like the trolls and the mocking and just the toxicity of social media. Yeah.
They expect far too much for considering they're the one that presses the button on the lineup and makes the decision.
Right, exactly. I can only give you the advice that I have, with the data that I have in front of me. Hindsight's 2020, of course. Like, like I just said with the Bear situation, how was I supposed to know that? I was far from the only person that was down on the Bears backfield. So, but of course I'll get flack for that. So it's very tough, but it's also the best. So as you know,
yes. Yep.
Okay, well, jumping into actual football stuff, we're going to kick it off with a segment called The Burn Book, which is, of course, a Mean Girls reference. So as fantasy managers, it's so easy to have recency bias, especially if a player has burned us, either due to injuries or a bad week. So we are going to run through 5 players, and I'd like you to briefly tell us how confident you are in that player moving forward, or if they are in your burn book. So the first player is Julio Jones. He's back from this hamstring injury, but is he really? He's had one good game all year. He had 128 yards in that game, but his other finishes have been well outside of the fantasy relevant spectrum. Are you putting Julio in your burn book?
No, not yet. He's just too good after the catch. We saw that on a couple plays this last week. He can still make those sideline grabs. We saw one of those this week. He's just too good. I feel like a lot of it stems from Tannehill is just having a really off year. He's not as efficient as he's been in the last couple of years. And if he starts to turn that around, I think it's going to come with Julio, and Julio just hasn't been fully healthy yet. I can't put him there yet. There are other guys that I would, but there's concerns.
I'm definitely concerned. I have him in one league, and I think part of that is why I'm like not ready to move on from him, because I actually don't have better options in that league. So I'm just rolling him out every single week. And you're right. Like the potential is there. And he's just a guy that I found myself making excuses for all season, whether it's Tannehill, whether it's the offensive line, whether it's just that he's injured. So I'm really hoping that down the stretch, he'll get healthy and we'll kind of see this offense go into full swing and really get its rhythm and not just be 300 carries for Derrick Henry every game or something like that. Yeah. So
that's part of the problem too with it. Like the 50, 60 snaps a game for that offense and 30 are Derrick Henry. Like it's not leaving a lot of room for other people.
Absolutely. Do you have a lot of exposure to Derrick Henry?
I have an okay amount. Yeah, I have him in a few leagues. I only play in about 10 leagues this year that set lineups, and I have him in I think 3 or so.
Nice.
So that's enough.
I don't have him in any leagues, and that wasn't intentional. That was just I only do one salary cap draft, and he was kept in that league, and then the other ones. I just didn't have the pick that like made sense at the time. Like I either had the one pick, which I had in Scott Fishbowl, and then, or I had like a back end pick or something. So it just didn't work out. And of course I'm bummed. And of course, if I could go back in time and do it, I wouldn't draft CMC 101, but of course things happen. That's obviously a super bummer because I am a Panthers fan. So anyway, the next guy we're going to talk about, he's on this segment every single week. And I mean, I should just move on from him, but it's Allen Robinson. I thought this would be the game like all week. I talked about this is the game for Darnell Mooney. It's the game for Allen Robinson. And of course, it's the game for Justin Fields because the Bucs secondary is trash. And unfortunately, Allen Robinson is wide receiver 60 in half PPR this season. Maybe it's Fields, maybe it's Nagy, maybe it's A-Rob not getting separation from defenders, but is A-Rob in your burn bug?
Yeah, I think he is. Justin Fields and Matt Nagy have completely made him not a fantasy viable player. I just don't see how this offense is going to turn around. Like I can look at the Titans and say, Derrick Henry runs a little less going forward. Tannehill is having a really off year. He just steps it up a little and you can raise Julio's bar. I just don't see that. This Bears offense looks terrible. It just looks really terrible right now. And I don't see much of a path for it to get much better on it at the current moment.
It's tough because I spent the whole preseason draft season talking about how I thought Justin Fields should be the number 3 overall pick and how once he went there, I was thinking, finally, Allen Robinson has a real quarterback. Right. And this will be like, he's free from Mitch Trubisky and Blake Bortles and all this trash quarterback play. And of course, it's like, this is the guy that A-Rob can't perform with.
He makes some really, really nice throws. I expected, like you did, so much better. I dropped him in so many leagues over the last couple of weeks. And I feel bad because I feel like I sabotaged the people who picked him up. They went and started him this week. But,
that's funny. I have a league. It's a very deep league with like really deep benches. So there's no one on waivers. Like guys like Davis Mills are not even available. So, so anyway, I drafted Russ and Justin Fields thinking that was a fire quarterback crew. It's only a 1 quarterback league. So I was like, I don't have to start Fields like yet. And of course lost Russ and I am flailing in that league now. I think I went 4-0 and now I've lost like the last 3. So that is just absolutely brutal. I have had to start Fields. I did pick up Case Keenum and didn't play him. And then obviously I should have, but even then, like I think Case Keenum had like 12 points. So not a lot of options if you're in these like really deep leagues. Like sometimes if you lose like a major player in a league like that, like it's really hard to overcome if you can't make a trade. And in a lot of like leagues like that, I just feel like people don't want to trade. They always think that they're getting taken advantage of or whatever. So it's very hard to make trades. I'm hoping that, I don't know, that I can just stay afloat.
Make it work. Stay afloat. Stay in the thick of it until you can, Russ comes back or whatever.
Pretty much. Yeah. All right. Well, A-Rob's in our burn book. Next is Odell Beckham. He has had a couple of decent games here and there. Like he looked really good in his first game. And I was like, oh, this is like the vintage Odell. Nothing stellar though. He's currently wide receiver 77 through 7 games, though he missed a few games at the beginning. Is Beckham droppable at this point? Is he in your burn book? What are you doing with him right now?
I don't know that he's droppable. That's a step too far, or either that, or I just play in shallower league or deeper leagues, where it makes no sense to drop him. But he's burnable for me. Maybe you make a good point that maybe he's droppable in that then I don't have to make that decision weekly anymore and someone else can have to deal with it. But he's right above Allen. He's right in that Allen Robinson range where neither of them seem to be the top target on their team anymore. It seems like Fields is preferring Mooney, and it seems like once at least the last couple of years Baker preferred Landry, and that's so much running game in that on that offense. And Stefanski coming from Minnesota, he's very a run game guy. I have trouble starting him most weeks. He's pretty burnable for me.
I feel the same way. Like you said, it's just an offense that is too run heavy for me. And I mean, the quarterback play hasn't necessarily been there for him to shine. And now Jarvis is back. So I am not excited about starting him in any leagues that I have. Next up is Antonio Gibson. Now, this one is not totally fair, considering Gibson is extremely banged up. He's got a fractured shin that he said like doesn't really bother him. But he outtouched JD McKissic this week, but McKissic outscored him.
And outsnapped him too.
Yep. Yeah. Is Gibson outside of your top 24 until he gets healthy?
I don't think so. And this is purely because I think the game script was much better to have McKissic in this last week. And this upcoming week, they get a Denver team who allowed like 60 and a touch to like at least 60 and a touchdown to the last 4 running backs they faced. A couple of them over 100, like Najee Harris went over 100. And yeah, this is it. And D'Ernest Johnson went over 100 and a touchdown. It's a beatable defense he's got this week, and then he gets the bye. So I would have him in my top 24 this week. Then he gets a bye, and hopefully he's healed up by then. And then we got the rest of the schedule. So I still think he's going to be in my top 24. Like, running backs are so thin right now, it's hard not to make the top 24.
Understood. Yeah. I mean, it's just warm bodies at this point that you're putting in your rankings. Like it's like, you're like, oh, well, he's not an RB2. And then you think about it, like, name 23 running backs that are better than him right now. And you're like, I can't. There's obviously been so many injuries. And with him, it's frustrating because the first game, when it was revealed that he was like dealing with the injury, he had 20 carries in that game. And I guess I was just like, oh, well, like, he's fine. I guess he's playing through it, just a flesh wound. Right. But, but apparently it is definitely really bothering him. So hopefully, like you said, he's able to sort of heal up through the bye and, regain his spot as the top running back on that team. They
did give him a couple carries inside the 5 this last week. Like, if he hits on one of those, that maybe we're not having this conversation, Totally.
I agree.
After the bye, he does get the Bucks and Panthers though. So that's a little rough, but he's definitely a top 20 guy still for me.
Speaking of the Panthers.
Okay.
That is my team. And oh my goodness, I thought that game was going to end 5-3, by the way, like, for a while. And I was watching Red Zone, obviously, and I was like, I haven't seen the Panthers on here in a while. It's just embarrassing. I don't know what's going on, if they just like they don't have their groove without CMC, if it's Sam Darnold, if it's the coaching staff, but they looked so lost yesterday. And it was just painful. Like, I saw Sam Darnold throw it like the one time that they switched to red zone. I was like, oh, they're on. And then he like chucks it up in the air. And like, the moment the ball leaves his hand, I'm like, oh, it's going to get intercepted. And it gets intercepted. And it was just like right to James Bradbury. And it was just like, just so painful because he's obviously a former Panther too. So anyway, that we were definitely a very fraudulent 3-0 team. Let's just leave it at that. All right. The final guy we're going to talk about is Mike Davis. He is RB 40.5 PPR after a 1-point game in week 7, largely been a disappointment for fantasy. He is a guy, I will say, that I ended up with a couple shares of him only because he was dropping so far in drafts. Now, obviously, he's like confirmation bias. He didn't deserve to be drafted there, but like, I thought he was good value because everyone was kind of down on him. And I thought it had gone like too far in one direction. Whatever. Okay. It stinks. I was kind of wrong about this Falcons offense in general. He's kind of in my burn book. Does he belong in our burn books? What say you?
I say that we're 7 weeks late to that party. I did not draft him in a single league or a single best ball league. Like, I was never a believer. I think that the only case that was being made for him was he's the only guy and he's going to get volume. And that's generally not something like I want to go for the talented guy. And it's just not something that I felt like they could just go away from the run a lot, or it'd become a platoon. Or watching Mike Davis for the Panthers last year, you saw he started out really hot, but then like his efficiency started going down. He didn't look as good as the games went on. And I just couldn't imagine that for a full season. Obviously I didn't predict this Cordell Patterson thing.
Yeah. I did not have on my bingo card for this season.
I had a couple late shots at him, like him in a couple leagues just from late end of draft.
Oh wow,
that really paid off, but I did not see this coming at all.
Does that hurt you as a Vikings fan with the year 9 breakout?
It does. It does. No, it really does. It's something that a lot of Vikings fans have talked about, that we just never utilized him right, and it makes me feel better that like even New England like started the path of utilizing him a little bit better and stuff. But like, I feel like this was always in the cards for him, and just nobody figured out how to use him until now. It's frustrating to see.
That's fair. I think obviously the talent was there. I'm surprised that it's Arthur Smith that figured out how to use him, just because we saw him like run it up the middle 800 times a game with Derrick Henry. He doesn't strike me as the most like innovative coach, and it just, I mean, it's cool to see though. Like, it's absolutely a really, really cool story and cool for fantasy and exciting.
I'll make a slight sidetrack on Arthur Smith. He was there so short, we don't know. Like, maybe he's the kind of guy that realizes the talent he has, and he's like, this is what I need to do with the talent I have. Mm-hmm. So like, that would be my argument, that maybe Arthur Smith saw what Derrick Henry did, and he's like, this is what we're going to do with Derrick Henry, and what we did with Ryan Tannehill. And when he moved to Atlanta, he's like, I got these different pieces. How do I make these work? And now we're seeing Patterson and Pitts finally, start to make hay after a few games, So
yeah,
and you might be right. That's what maybe he's uncreative, and that's what he was in Tennessee. But I think the other side is maybe he just, sits and tries to figure out how to utilize the pieces he has best.
I mean, that's what good coaches do. Obviously, right? The personnel is going to be different everywhere you go. And I think that's what separates like the good coaches from the great coaches, to figure out how to wield the weapons that you have at your disposal. Cause a lot of that isn't necessarily in your control.
Right.
But yeah, Mike Davis burned,
no,
which should have happened 7 weeks ago. I agree with you. I'm embarrassed, but that I'll take the L for.
No, he's sabotage drop worthy. Like, I feel like you can drop him, someone's going to pick him up and try to start him, and it's not going to end well for that team. Like,
that's fair.
He is droppable.
Yeah, he is poisonous. I don't need him in my life right now. All right, that will do it for the burn book. Our next segment is called Full Send or That's Cap, which is sort of the opposite one. Full Send. I'm not trying to like explain this to you, because I'm sure you know what I'm talking about.
I'm a Minnesota boy. We have in Minnesota snowmobiling. You talk about full send like jumps and stuff.
Yeah, it's an extreme sport thing. Like, you go full send, you're like head first. I'm totally into it. And then that's cap means the opposite. Like, that's not real. It's a mirage or whatever. So I'm going to give you 5 players whose values are on the rise. And I want to know, are you sending it on this player, or is that cap? Wait, first, side note, do you snowmobile? And like, are you do you do cool stuff?
I don't anymore. I don't do a lot of the cool stuff I probably did when I was younger or whatever. Now I'm more of a stay-at-home family guy. We go on a lot of hikes because our backyard is a regional park. Like
that's so cool.
Hiking trails, and it's all wooded. Our backyard has a trail leading into all these trails and stuff. So I'm more of that guy now.
I like that. That's really cool. I have never been on a snowmobile as snow and mountainy as I am. So hoping that is something that I get to try. It looks so cool. So I'm definitely very jealous. All right. The first player we're going to talk about is Joe Burrow. I was super high on Burrow going into this week, though. Even I did not expect to see that performance. He completed 23 of 38 for 416 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. I know we're going full send on Jamar Chase. Like, he's absolutely a stud. He could be the 101 in Dynasty. But are we going full send on Joe Burrow as a QB1 rest of season?
I mean, it's hard not to. He's got, I think he's the only quarterback in the NFL with multiple touchdown passes in every single game at this point.
That's an amazing stat. I love that.
I'm pretty sure he is. I'm pretty sure he was going into the week, and then he threw 3 more. I am definitely full send on him. I don't see how you're not. Once he gets a better, it seems like every once in a while when he's targeting, other players like Higgins and Boyd, it's like for some reason the connection isn't there like it's there with Chase, which is weird because he played with those two guys all of last year. Like,
right.
People talk about he played with Chase in college. Well, he played with Higgins and Boyd last year too. Like, there should be a connection there. But no, the offense just has too many good pieces. The defense is good enough to get them the ball a decent amount. The only problem I do have is they play one of the slowest paces in the NFL, and you think that might cap them at some point, but it hasn't yet. So I'm in on Joe Burrow.
I love that. This Bengals team has been one of the best, I think, surprises. Not necessarily, I think we knew they were going to be better if Joe Burrow was healthy, and then plus Jamar Chase. But, they got a lot of flack for obviously not taking Penei Sewell, and just like, I don't think that people necessarily thought of them as a contender. And now they're out there beating the Ravens, and it's incredible to watch. They are really, really good. And like you said, they are pretty well-rounded. I think the defense has been a really good surprise in terms of, like, I thought that they were going to have a great defense this year. So certainly I am going full send on Joe Burrow. I have been a fan of his for a while, so I'm excited to see him. The next guy we're going to talk about is Kenny Gainwell. Found the end zone for the third time this year and had the most running back touches. That was partially due to Miles Sanders getting banged up in the game. They said that he didn't break any bones, but there's a good chance that he will miss time. Are we going full send on Gainwell as a viable flex play? And if Sanders misses time, maybe like an RB2?
That's what it is. It feels more like a half send to me. Like it feels like a full send for the next week or two. But I feel like it's still much more Sanders' job. He was getting 70-80% of the snaps played the last 2 weeks before the injury, and it seemed like they were starting out that way in this one. I think he's going to be a great option for the next couple of weeks. Like they clearly trust him. They clearly like him in the pass game. They're targeting him almost 4 targets a game, something like that. And that was as a backup to Miles Sanders. He was getting that. So for the next couple of weeks, sure. As long as Miles Sanders is out, it's kind of a half answer, but I mean, he gets the Raiders, he gets the Chargers, he gets the Lions, he gets the Broncos. I might've gotten the order of those wrong, but those are very beatable run defenses. So definitely full send for the next few weeks, at least.
Yeah, I'm excited about him. He's a guy that I've been pumping up for a while. I took him in a keeper league, and I was like kind of hoping that there would be some value there. Maybe not necessarily, but I think right now for bye week fill-ins, and like you said, for the next couple of weeks, he could definitely be a viable play. So I'm definitely excited about that. Miles Sanders is frustrating. He's like borderline in my burn book, and I didn't want to put him in that segment because he's hurt, and that's kind of maybe like not necessarily his fault. And now he had an off game, but still he's like burn book adjacent for me.
What's really annoying is like he was a buy candidate for me. Like I was all in on the next, with that schedule, the next few weeks of Miles Sanders, and now the injury, like, it's either he's not performing or now he's injured. Like it's something.
Yeah. Super, super frustrating case with him. He's a guy that I definitely avoided in drafts, and I'm kind of happy about that just because I think it's probably a headache, kind of like a Mike Davis headache. So win some, lose some. The next guy we're going to talk about is Khalil Herbert. And I already talked about him, how he sat on my bench and posted a 100-yard game in a brutal week 7 matchup against the Buccaneers. While Damian Williams was barely featured. I feel like he had like a couple carries or something. I don't know the stat line, but are we going full send on Herbert until Montgomery gets back?
It's hard not to, what he did with the Bucs. I mean, until Montgomery, this is the same as Gainwell. It's until Montgomery gets back, because then I think it's a timeshare. I feel like he's earned his way into 10 plus touches a game when Montgomery gets back. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're both like just completely splitting time. And honestly, it's almost to the point where I feel like it made Montgomery expendable once he's done with it, once his contract's up with the Bears. I'm full send for the next couple of weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that it was almost like last week with Darrell Williams, that not necessarily like that I'm full send on him, but that it's enough to worry me if I am the manager for CEH, or in this case, if I have David Montgomery, that this is maybe the bigger takeaway, that they may be in some kind of timeshare when they get back. And that is obviously the worst thing for fantasy football and running backs. So I will definitely be playing him next week in the leagues that I still have him. And I'll just whip myself for the rest of it. But the next guy we're going to talk about is Michael Pittman Jr. He's had a couple of strong games this year, coming off of a 100-yard game with a touchdown, was out targeted by Zach Pascal, and this was without T.Y. Hilton. Are you going full send on Pittman as the undisputed wide receiver one in this offense and a viable fantasy asset? Or is trusting a Wentz-wielded wideout cap?
I felt better about Pittman earlier in the season when he was averaging like 8 to 10 targets a game. Yeah. The last few have been like 3 targets, 4 targets. He's making something work with them. But, oh man, it's right in the middle. I think he's the wide receiver one, and I think he's good as long as he gets targeted. I guess I can't. It's one of those I can't go full send, but I don't think it's cap either. I think it's legit. I think he's a legit good wide receiver.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I think it's what I'm full send on is his talent, which I was full send on last year too, and obviously he got banged up and whatnot, but what's cap is I think the volume in this offense isn't there for me to really trust him. Like same thing with like Mo Alley Cox, who is a guy that a lot of people probably added for bye weeks or whatever, or injury fill-ins, and he did well, but it's like on very few targets. And they're making it work with no targets, but that's just not necessarily sustainable long term.
Right. Yeah. That's a perfect way to put it.
All right. On to our final player is a guy that's very close to my heart, a guy that I would say that I took a lot of flack for taking him at 401 in the Scott Fish Bowl. It is Kyle Pitts, but it is finally Pitts season, and I am here for it. Yep. After a fairly slow start, he's crushed 100 yards in each of his last 2 games. My only potential concern is Russell Gage and Calvin Ridley now both being healthy and potentially siphoning targets away from him. But are we going full send on Pitts? Like, this is the guy that we were hoping to see. Yep. This is the guy that deserved to be drafted as, tight end 4 or whatever. Are we going full send on him?
100%. It's not even debatable at this point for me. I had him at tight end 5 for the longest time this offseason. And I feel like a lot of that was just, he's a rookie. There's lots of things to it. And I moved him up to tight end 3 ahead of Kittle. Oh, wow. I just felt it was too many mouths to feed in San Francisco, and they run just too much. I didn't think the volume would be there right before the season. And I was very vocal about stop making historical tight end arguments about him.
Yes.
Just like he doesn't fit in with guys that were drafted 14 years ago. The landscape has completely changed. He plays out wide like 70+% of the time. He's not a traditional tight end. You just stop making those arguments. I felt it was a little bit lazy. Honestly, I felt that was a lazy argument. You want to tell me you don't believe Arthur Smith's offense is going to feed him, or there's too much with Ridley and there's not going to be enough time. Make those arguments. Don't make the historical tight end argument. That's stuff from 15 years ago. It doesn't matter to me. But that said, he's on pace to break all those records now. And that's what it is. I think they've finally realized how to make him a focal point in the offense. They've got his little 4-game window that Justin Jefferson had, that a lot of wide receivers come into the league and they need a few games to get behind them, and then they're good to go. I think he's good to go for the rest of the season, and he's going to shatter some of those tight end records.
I love to hear that, because for a number of reasons. First, the early part of the season, like you said, I mean, there is an adjustment period for guys like that. And people were so quick to write him off. they were like, he's going to be the biggest bust. And look at this, like, ooh, like, can't believe that you drafted a first year tight end and expected anything out of it. Now, I was all over the Kyle Pitts trade all preseason. I even wrote an article about like a debate type article with someone at Action, like a playful one. And one of the major things was his body size and his athleticism, and all those things compared so closely to Travis Kelce. And Kelce missed his first year mostly due to injury. And then his actual first full season, he was phenomenal. And I was like, this is the analog. You guys are comparing something that's just like a role that's not necessarily the one he's going to play. All his sort of criticism coming out of college was that he wasn't good at blocking and all that. And I was like, if they use him as a blocker, that is criminal. That's they're not going to take him that early and use him as a blocker and not use him as an outside receiver. And he's just like a big dude. And I'm just so excited to see him blossom right now.
Yeah, it's a wonderful thing to watch. And there were so many people vocal those first couple of weeks about, what's your unicorn now? And I've restrained talking to any of them about it because I don't want a victory lap on him. But this is what he's going to be. He's going to have down weeks. He'll have some down weeks. They all do. Hawkinson does, Waller does. I mean, Kelce a few weeks ago against the Eagles went 4 catches for 23 yards when they had Slay cover in most of the game. He's going to have down games. He'll have more down games this year, but he's going to be more up in that 1, 2, 3 tight end upper echelon for the rest of hopefully his career, but I like him a lot this year.
Love to see it. By the way, people that are taking victory laps on a guy not performing 2 weeks into his NFL career need to just go away. Victory laps in general, they're like the really grandiose ones, especially like the ones that are like, you drafted Kyle Pitts early, like couldn't be me. And like, I hate that phrase. That drives me nuts. Just a lot of that dunking on people. I think there's a way to talk about things and make it a discussion, and that's not one of them. That's not productive in any way to me. Yep. All right, Scott, we have 8 more rapid fire questions, and I will get you back to your construction, everything going on in your life. Question 13 is, name one player you just can't quit or you always find yourself making excuses for. So for me, that is Joe Mixon, the football player, not the human necessarily.
Oh boy. One player that I just can't quit, always make excuses for. Oh man, this is a tough one.
Chris Howard's told me his was Julio.
Yeah, I'm going to my leagues real quick to see if there's one that really, and it's usually like a deeper player. Like I'm the guy that is always rostering like super deep tight ends, like your Donald Parhams and your guys like that, and Tanyan before he exploded. But I'm trying to think of someone that I just can't quit. They should be rapid fire, right? And I'm doing a terrible job at the rapid fire part of
Take your own pace with this one. It's definitely a weird question. It's just like, it's a guy that like I make TikToks about how totally blind I am about like, just he's obviously underperformed in almost every season that we've seen him. But this season I was like, it's okay. This is the year. This is Mixon season. And I mean, he's had a number of good games, so I'm not victory lapping necessarily, but I'm not quitting him yet.
Well, I guess if it's going to be someone that's down right now, I was going to say, I just can't ever seem to quit Cortland Sutton, because when he's on, he's on. And he's just not, he's been okay this year, but I was going to go a little deeper, and I was going to say Gabriel Davis. Preston Williams. I love those guys' talent, and they just can't seem to find a spot. And also their teams keep bringing in wide receivers to play over them. Yeah. So if it's going to be someone deeper, it's got to be Gabriel Davis or Preston Williams or guys like that I just love their potential, and they just can't get on the field.
I totally agree. Davis was a guy that I was pumping up as a sleeper. He was like up there with like Darnell Mooney, also a guy that Amon-Ra St. Brown, also a guy he was a guy that I had on so many rosters, and I did drop obviously, but I held on to him like way too long. Right. And then I was like, oh, well, maybe it's Amon-Ra season since Quintez Cephas went down, and it seems like it's Kalif Raymond season actually.
Yeah, it's those two. I'm never gonna. I always pick the wrong. I have them both on one roster, and I always pick the wrong one to start. And I feel like that's going to be the whole season.
Yeah, definitely frustrating with the Gabriel Davis situation, just because like the logic is there. You want exposure to this high scoring Bills offense,
right?
And he has the talent, but yeah, there is a lot of competition, and especially with Dawson Knox breaking out. That's like another mouth that they kind of need to feed.
And 35-year-old Emmanuel Sanders looking like he's 25 for some reason.
Yeah, he's doing phenomenally. So for sure. All right. Predict when the Vikings will win their next Super Bowl.
so the win. Wow. Probably never.
Like, that is a reaction that I have never gotten. So I'm really living for this. Go on. Sorry.
Never. Like, I just turned 42 years old last week, and the Vikings have not been to a Super Bowl in my lifetime. We've been to a few NFC Championships games. We've blown out in a couple of them. Cheated out of the Saints one with the Bounty Gate and the BS call.
Yeah.
There's just like our kicking it always screws us. Like there's the Gary Anderson kick in 98. Like, I just don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime. I just don't think it's ever going to happen, but I'm going to enjoy the ride.
Totally understood. I mean, you have a lot of good pieces right now, but it takes obviously an extraordinary team to get there. So It's funny because I've had a lot of Bears fans on this podcast for whatever reason. Like I had Adam Rank, I had my friend Jeremy Layton, and yesterday, Andy Behrens was on last week, and he's obviously a huge Bears fan, and the range of answers is out there, but I feel like someone said like in 2 years. So so they're obviously full in on Fields. It just very much enjoyed that reaction. So wow. I feel the same way about my Panthers. I think when I became a fan, it was the year that the Panthers were really good. And I think that's the best I'm going to see for a really long time. So unfortunate, but such is football. Give us one Vikings player who you think is underrated for fantasy.
Probably Tyler Conklin, if it has to be, because Jefferson and Thielen and Cousins is always underrated though. Like it feels like Cousins is constantly putting up at least, most weeks it feels like he's putting up top 12 type of numbers. I think he ended last season as a top 13 guy. He's put up a really, it's probably truthfully Cousins. It feels like he's every year people just don't seem to like him, but he puts up so many really, really good fantasy performances. I'd want to say Conklin because I feel like he's better than people think, but it's got to be Cousins.
What are your thoughts on KJ Osborn?
I think he's good. I think he's really good. He makes some really, really good highlight level, like sideline plays, good catches. There's a reason he flat out beat everyone out for that third wide receiver role. And he's on the field, 60-70% of the snaps, because he is very clearly, you could make an argument he's the best third receiver we've had for the better part of a decade, maybe more, maybe almost 2 decades, maybe back to the Moss Carter, Jake Reed days. Like it's been a while since we had a number 3 that looks as good as he does on the field, but he's going to be inconsistent in this offense. It's tough for us to support 3 wide receivers.
Understood. Yeah. I'm a little salty about him, obviously, since he made the game-winning catch against my Carolina Panthers, but I do have him on a couple leagues, so kind of hanging on to him, seeing if he has a little bit of a breakout season down the stretch.
Good spots. He plays the Cowboys their next game. That's a good defense for him to match up.
Yeah, because like Trayvon Diggs, he'll be obviously very occupied with the other receivers, and I feel like their other corners are just not there. So I think that would be maybe a good game for him, or maybe even Thielen. Was Joe Flacco ever elite? Yes or no?
3 games, maybe 4 games, like that run, and you could make arguments about that run as well, but he really bet on himself there, but not outside of that. Like he was a good, starting quarterback that was good enough to be a starting quarterback in the league, but I don't think he was ever elite.
Fair enough. I think most people have said like something like your answer, I think most people have given like a 6-game stretch he was league. Yeah. So I pretty much agree with you there. How many Vikings players will finish at the top 5 in their respective positions for fantasy
this year?
Yes.
Top 5 at their position? If it's points per game, maybe 2. Dalvin Cook would have a really good shot, and I think Justin Jefferson could get there. Yeah, in points per game, I think you could make a really good case for 2 of them, but I think Cook just keeps missing time, so I don't know that that's going to happen.
Yeah, definitely hoping that he gets healthy, though I have Madison on a lot of rosters and I don't have Cook. He's just a guy that I targeted. Who should managers' top waiver ad be this week?
Oh, wow. I have not dug into that at all. I think we just mentioned one. I think Raymond is just getting way too many targets to ignore at this point, and they're going to be in negative game scripts all the time. So he's got to be right up there. I feel like the other guys that we would mention, like Herbert's picked up everywhere. Dennis Johnson was picked up everywhere before that game. I mean, I think you're going to have to go pretty deep to find someone else.
Fair enough. Yeah. Kenny Gainwell could be an interesting ad. I think that he's probably under 50% roster or like right around there. So certainly could be an interesting ad if we see that Miles Sanders misses time.
Yeah, that's a really good one. He was 31% last Tuesday.
Okay.
When I looked into that last Tuesday. So
okay. Yeah. So I think he'll be a decent one, but Kalif Raymond, definitely a guy that I have my eye on in a lot of leagues where I am.
My problem is I'm constantly looking at a deeper, like way too deep. He's like 3% or 5% rostered.
Fair enough. Well, a lot of people play in deep leagues and they need those guys. Give me one player who you think is primed for a big fantasy season next year.
Ooh, big fantasy season next year. I think I'm going to go with a guy that it should have been this year, but I think it happens next year now in Jeudy. I feel like they maybe addressed their quarterback situation a little bit better, and he's got a full healthy season ahead of him. I think next year might end up being his breakout. He'll be okay the rest of this year, but he'll be coming off injury. So yeah, I'll just say Jeudy for next year, I guess.
My pick for that would probably be same team, and it's going to be Javonte Williams.
Oh yeah.
That makes sense. He's like my breakout guy. I always knew it was not going to be this year, and everyone's like, oh no, this is the Javonte game. And I'm like, it's probably not the Javonte game, like until Melvin Gordon goes away. So
yes. Yep.
Not to, this is not necessarily a dig at any kicking, but how many attempts would it take you to make an extra point?
Oh, I don't think I could have one. I have tried kicking, and I've hit field goals from 20 plus out, like 20 yards, so about 30 out or so. But man, that would be really hard. I believe it's a 33 yarder. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that would take a lot. Let's go with 8 attempts. Okay. I feel like maybe I'd get lucky on one of them.
That's not that many. Like, you could throw me out there and say like $1 million make the extra point, and it would, I don't know, hundreds. Like, I don't think that I have the physical capacity to do that. So, but I've also never tried it. So it's cool that you've tried it. I just have never had the opportunity. Finally, if you had one cardinal rule to tell someone just getting into fantasy this year, what would it be?
It depends on if we're talking about, like if they're actually looking for a league. Like I always recommend, find a league with a group of people that you enjoy, or find a set of rules that you want to play in. Like don't try to like mishmash either one. Sometimes that works, but if you're in a league with a bunch of people you enjoy hanging out with and talking to and like conversing with, and there's good camaraderie, no matter what the settings are, you're probably going to like the league. Or on the other side, you can play with people you don't like, or there's not much talking if you love the settings. So like, I think you have to really like introspect and figure out which one of those that you is most you. Like, which part do you want? Do you want to try something interesting, or do you want to try something with people you like? And that's going to lead you to like it a lot better.
I like that answer. No one has ever given like a interesting answer like that, for sure. I think that's very important, and very important, obviously, to like your league mates and just have fun with it. That's, I think, the most important part people forget about, especially in our circles. But all right, that will do it for this round of 21 questions with our esteemed guest, Scott Fish. Scott, I can't thank you enough for joining me during this insanely busy time. Please tell everyone where they can find you this NFL season, promote yourself, whatever.
Sure. Scottfish24 on Twitter is where you can find most of my stuff. I'm on Fantasy Football Weekly, which is nationally syndicated on radios all over America. And it's on iHeartRadio. It's on all your podcast apps as well. Safe Leagues is a commissioner service I run, but you're going to have to wait till next season to join a league, the off season to join a league. But that's Scottfish24 on Twitter is where you can find most of my stuff.
Scott has a fire Twitter account, so everyone should go out there and follow him. Thank you again. As a reminder, Sean Kerner and Chris Raybon are here on the Fantasy Flex every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, giving you guys all the DFS, waiver wire, and rankings info to help you dominate your fantasy leagues. I will be back this Thursday and every Thursday with my mailbag episodes. Speaking of which, you should email any mailbag questions to mailbag@actionnetwork.com. Thanks again for listening. Please rate and review our show on Apple Podcasts. Download us wherever you like to listen, and we will see you next time on the Fantasy Flex presented by Prize Picks. Peace out, y'all.